Now, for more on Chile's economy and its future, I'm joined by Peter Hakim. He's President Emeritus and Senior Fellow at Inter-American Dialogue. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much.
So, as we've heard, Chile is described as Latin America's most stable economy, yet the government's economic team just resigned. What's happening there?
Well, that was a sort of battle between economists who are acting like economists do, focused on growth and careful fiscal management, and the politicians who were worried about groups of voters who the problem was over a mine that they were going to open up. The economists wanted the investment desperately, $2.5 billion or more for a new iron ore mine. And the politicians in the cabinet said, this is going to create difficulty for our green followers, for our environmentalists. And they prevailed, and the economists lost out. And this is sort of, it was a continuing battle between the political side and the economic. And I think the economists just sort of said they were fed up at the end, and they decided that the only thing they could do was to leave.
So then what sort of potential economic fallout do you think we could expect?
Well, surprisingly, there hasn't been much. People are now waiting for the election, which is only 2 months away. The leading candidate is one of Chile's richest businessmen. So there's not a great deal of worry. In fact, the economy seems to be beginning to move up slowly but steadily.
Now, as you mentioned, we have elections coming up in November. These are going to be presidential, parliamentary, and regional elections. How do you think all this is going to then affect economic output? Will things be put on hold until then?
Well, it's 2 months away. There seems to be a clear leadership by Sebastián Piñera, who occupied the presidency 4 years ago. He's a known commodity. He looks pretty clearly leading in the polls. The current government, its candidate, the government supporters have split into two groups. It's going to be very hard for them to gain the needed 51% to overcome Piñera. And so I think people are looking at this, well, we're getting the technocrats and the business leaders back, and that's good for the economy.
Now, we did see that the economy did seem to stall in the first quarter. What do you think is driving that, and how does that change your expectations for the rest of the year?
Well, I think in part, Chile, half of its exports are still copper, and the price of copper was falling. It's beginning to rise again, not surprising. Also, it's not only that copper is half of Chile's trade, trade is virtually half of Chile's income. So that's a big chunk of money. Secondly, there was sort of a little bit of unhappiness, more than a little bit maybe, with the business community and the politics of the Bachelet government that felt she was focused more on distributional issues and less on growth issues. And there was sort of a bad incident of corruption in which one of her children was sort of tangentially involved. So, I mean, there was a whole series of things, but I think primarily the price of copper was what, and plus you have to add one other thing, if I can, is that Chile is still doing pretty well compared to its neighbors in Latin America.
True.
I mean, Brazil has lost almost 10% of its GNP, while Chile keeps growing at a slower pace, but it's growing. And that's not the case of a dozen other countries in Latin America.
Certainly important to put that context in there. Now, you did mention trade. We know that China is not, if the largest, one of the largest trading partners with Chile. How has that relationship evolved over the last 5 to 10 years, and where do you see it going from here?
Well, I mean, China has really become an essential element in the Chilean economy, if you like. It started looking to Chile for, not surprisingly, copper, and moved into, I believe now China is the largest trading partner of Chile. But what's surprising in the recent years, not from the 5, 10 years back, but in the last 2 or 3 years, they've begun to purchase other Chile's, if you like, high-tech fruit exports or high-tech wine exports. I say high-tech because these are generally thought of as commodities, but there's as much technology going into them as going into many of the things we do consider high-tech. And this is terrific for Chile because it's an opening to diversify away from copper into these high-value commodities. These are not staples like soybeans or wheat. These are really, like I said, high-tech products.
And they've certainly been looking to diversify. Thank you so much, as always, Peter Hakim, President Emeritus and Senior Fellow at the Inter-American Dialogue.